welcome to another edition. It's Dr. Sakisha Hylick, your marriage and relationship success coach, and I am super excited about this conversation that we're going to have this evening. You know, there's so many times in our lives when, as women, as entrepreneurs, we experience or encounter those phases in our lives where we know that we are called to something different. We know that we're called higher. We're called to something greater. But for some reason or another, life circumstances get in the way. Our businesses, our jobs, our families, whatever the case may be. And sometimes you feel like I have missed that opportunity. I've missed that call. Well, guess what? Tonight, we're going to make sure we help you get up the courage to answer that call. And I have the most amazing person here just to help you accomplish that. So let's talk about what happens when purpose is calling and you are not answering. So we have a phenomenal guest tonight who, since discovering her purpose, has gone from corporate to entrepreneurship, from real estate investing, authorship, international speaking assignments, working with clients globally, and hosting an international women's economic conference, all on a mission to empower 1 million women to gain economic independence as they make their purpose mark in this world. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a wife, you know, if you're watching this broadcast, if you're listening to it and you are struggling with purpose, you are struggling with answering the call, well, look no further. Tonight we have joining us none other than Dr. Jena Bell. So Dr. Bell, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing just fabulous, just absolutely fabulous. And thank you so much for having me here.
Well, we thank you for answering the call to be on this podcast. And I am so excited about you being here. With everything that's transpiring in the world, we're noticing that there's a shifting taking place. People are transforming or transitioning from corporate jobs to entrepreneurship. You know, there's so many different changes. Where we are this year in 2021 looks probably drastically different than where we were in 2020. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about your story and your background, how you went from a 30-year corporate career to entrepreneurship? Let's encourage for that one lady who's kind of got her toe on the edge and isn't sure, you know, should I step out on faith or should I stay where I am?
You know what? So look, to everybody listening out there, let me tell you, sometimes life can turn us around. We think that life is just happening to us, but it's happening for us. And so my journey from corporate to entrepreneurship. So let me just tell you, I was in corporate for 30 years. I was the girl that checked all the boxes and did everything right because I was living the life that I thought I wanted, but the ones that the world had expected, that you graduate from high school, you go to college, you get that big job in corporate America, and that's all she writes, right? And then you realize you get there. And then you begin to wonder. I was wondering, but I wasn't ready to leave. Let me just put that right there. So I was wondering, but I wasn't ready to leave. And then one day, out of the clear blue sky, it's like you're told your job is no longer needed. Your services are no longer required. Well, let me tell you. So my entree into entrepreneurship was not a leap. It was a push. And what they did is they pushed me into a direction that I didn't know that I was ready for, but God. So I was able to take that 30-year career and everything that I had done and then begin to use it. But it took me some time, and we'll talk about that and we'll get into that. But it was that push. So if there's anybody out there, and I know a lot of people have lost their jobs and you're thinking life might be over, gotcha. It's just beginning. And that's been my story. It was a push in the right direction, and it's been a new beginning ever since. So it's been fabulous, but there were some hurdles along the way. And I'm just here as living witness that you can overcome those hurdles.
Wow. Now, what you said was so important that you had checked all the right boxes. Now, how many of you out there, be honest, you're in the comfort of your own home, so you can raise your hand. How many of you were box checkers? High school, check. I went to school, check. I got married, check. I had kids, check. but you're checking all these boxes, but you still didn't feel fulfilled. Maybe you didn't feel like you had accomplished your purpose. Now, Dr. Jenna, you talk about being a purpose driven woman. Let's talk about how this is important and how this can impact our listeners. How did you come about becoming a purpose driven woman?
Oh, thank you. And it's Gina. I'm just gonna
I'm sorry, Gina.
that's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
The so when you are pushed into an area or into a realm that's unfamiliar to you, there's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of things that begin to go through your mind. Anybody out there feel like that? Because that's what happened to me. I started questioning me. I started questioning what God had for me. I started questioning whether or not I had even made the right decisions with all the sacrifices that I had made along the way. I was like, did I not do something right? But see, that's what happens when you're in misalignment. And so, had it not been for that push, I'm not sure I would have discovered what God really had for me. And it was in the dark days, the lonely nights after getting divorced, because I got divorced in August 10th. I walked out of divorce court August 17th. They said you're no longer needed. so, um,
Wow.
so it was a double whammy. And my daughter was getting ready to go off to college. So I was getting ready to go into an empty nest. So it was
Oh
like
my
a triple
goodness.
whammy for me. It's like all the titles no longer were standing. So, but it was in that dark day that night
Mhm.
that I began to see the light. And I was in darkness for a while. And I began to see the light and what started emerging. And I did the work. I did I had to get still. I had to go through several iterations of it. But God began to unfold a new beginning in my life of
Oh,
purpose. And I've been on a mission ever since. Is that purpose of helping people and to being a witness to God's grace. But it's really about helping women because I was stuck for a long time, right? But I was stuck because I was attached to everything else that didn't matter, all the material stuff, all that kind of stuff. But it's when you can get away and you realize that that's not where your joy comes from. And so my joy comes from being at peace, being knowing who I am and the purpose that God has on my life. And it is to really help other women to be that game changer they've been designed to be, to recognize who they are when they see themselves in the mirror, and then to gain economic independence. Because we stay
wow.
stuck. I don't know, you probably have talked to so many people who are stuck in relationships, stuck in jobs, all that stuff, because they
Yes.
don't feel like they have the financial wherewithal to get out.
Hmm.
And that's what I've experienced with women all across the globe.
Now, you have hit so many major key points. So, for those of you that are listening, either live or via the replay, and you found yourself at a point where you are questioning some of the decisions, just go ahead and raise your hand. It's okay. We won't see you, but we want you to acknowledge guess what? Just because that's where I was, that's a phase in my life, that's a chapter. And Dr. Gina, she's demonstrating firsthand that you can turn the page and focus on the next chapter in your life. Because, truth be told, we've all been through those phases where we question some of the decisions. Did I make the right decision? Did I do the right thing? But just because that's where you are right there does not mean where you have to stay. There's so much purpose that's on the inside of each and every one of us. And some of you, it's just stirring. It's ready to come forth. And a part of this pandemic that we've been through is stirring it up even more because things have changed. There's been a shift. And what Dr. Bell was talking about is the fact that she's on a mission to help women gain economic empowerment. And that is huge. Now, you may be listening and saying, okay, well, I may not be called to do that, but you are called to do something. And you've got to figure out what that something is. What is that purpose that's on the inside of you? And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that this evening. So I want to thank you so much for being here because I'm sure that question for every listener out there, it's resonated, it's gone through their mind. oh, I'm in this phase right now, but I feel a shift. Sometimes you get a little uncomfortable because it's time to transition to something different. But the purpose that God has on the inside of you is so much greater than what we can even fathom. You know, it's
Yes.
just amazing. So let's talk about this purpose, just stepping into your purpose. Can you share with us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. And I want to comment on one of the things you said. When you start sensing it, I call it a disruption in the soul.
Yes.
That's a sign that there's a misalignment. Not that you've done anything wrong, just that you're out of alignment with your soul, with that purpose that God has for you. And sometimes, and I have to be very transparent. I was 55 when this happened. 54. 54 when it happened. And can you just imagine all of a sudden now you're single. Now it's a title. I had to just face it. You were unemployed. And now your daughter doesn't need you as much, right? Because she's grown. She's trying to spread her own wings. And it's like, who am I? That's who I've been for the last 30 years, right?
Yes.
So when you say stepping into purpose, it can be scary. And I am here to tell you, it can be scary until you accept it. Once you accept it, then you got to surrender. And it's about then stepping and being willing and open to receive, because the ideas, the opportunities, they start coming at you so fast. But that's what purpose is, because God has promised us abundance. And many of us haven't achieved it because we haven't stepped into what he has for us. We're still scared. And so you got to let go of the fear. So to any woman out there who's questioning, I don't care how old you are. I was telling somebody just the other day, she said, I'm too old. I was like, no, you're not. As long as you're still breathing. It's not too late. It's not too late.
Wow. Now you said some key things. I'm always listening for to help me remember some things. You talked about the importance of accepting it and surrendering. So to that woman that's saying, okay, I'm accepting it and I'm going to surrender. What is your next piece of advice that you would give to that woman that knows, hey, I'm called for greater. I feel that stirring. I'm recognizing this misalignment and I'm ready to get aligned with what God's purpose and plan is for me. What is your suggestion or your word of advice for that woman?
So let me say this. Everybody has been called to purpose. We might be called differently. Some are called to serve locally, some globally, but you've been called. So once you hear it, you understand it, they have to connect with it. And that connection is part of the not only the acceptance, but get this, it's the belief. You got to believe that God has something for you, and believe that if he has something for you, if he's put that vision in your life, he's going to give you the provision. So you got to believe in yourself. See, what keeps us from stepping into purpose oftentimes is fear and lack of confidence. So you got to have the belief not only in God, your source, right? But also in yourself. Because one of the things, Dr. Shakisha, said that I learned while I was teaching purpose is that many people weren't stepping even after they discovered it. And I began to study that. And you know what I realized, what I found out, is that when you are blinded by your past, by the hurt, the disappointment, that creates fear, that then creates, questioning your confidence in yourself and questioning your beliefs. So you can't see what's in front of you because you're still tied to what's behind you. So you got to shed all of that. And then you begin to see. And once you begin to see, you got to have the courage to walk. And that's what I did. It was like, and I'll tell you this funny story. See, I was on the stage with my former employer speaking. It was small stages, but 500 people is not that small, right? Well, I was a little stage of 500, right, with walls around me because I was confined by their rules and regulations.
Yes.
But once God turned me around,
Mm.
in less than 2 years, I was speaking in South Africa on a stage with 2,500 from across the globe talking about my faith. You hear what I'm saying? I'm talking
Yes.
to entrepreneurs about stepping in purpose and stepping into their faith. I couldn't have done that before. So there were women in the audience from South Africa, from Tanzania, from Belgium, you know, people from Australia, all over the globe.
Wow.
And it's like, you had the courage to get up here and talk about your faith? I say, because it's faith that had got me on the stage. You
Absolutely.
know, that's where the freedom comes from. When you're purpose driven and you believe in God and believe that God is going to order your steps, you got to walk in the steps that He's ordered for you.
And you know what is so funny? That preparation for the 500, that was, well, that phase of 500, it was getting you ready for the 2,500 and beyond. So we've
And
got to recognize that sometimes, when they say if you're, oh my gosh, I'm paraphrasing it, it's escaping me now, but you're talking about when you're, um, oh gosh, basically you rule over much. If you're faithful over the little, you can be ruler over the much. So God was preparing you back then and saying, hey, let me just show her a snippet of what I have for her. And then you have that faith, the size of the mustard seed, to step out. Sometimes God makes our situations uncomfortable, so we have to step out, or that we have to recognize that season is no longer serving us, that He's saying, okay, I'm ready for you to step into your next season. And when it's time for us to step into that next season, if we can't exactly see what it looks like, we're standing there with our toe on the edge. And I'll make you laugh. I went on there was a women's retreat, and they decided they wanted to go zip lining. So the first two parts of it, if you got scared, you could turn back. But after the second one, it was a point of no return. You had to go forward. So while
oh,
we're going zip lining, it got to the point where the cord was so long, I couldn't see the end result. And I was afraid. I was ready to turn back. And the man behind me said, either you can go on your own or I'm going to push you. And I started thinking about how many times where God is saying, okay, now I'm opening up the door. Well, if not, I'm going to push you. I'm going to make it so uncomfortable that you have no choice but to jump. And that's, when we're stepping into purpose, you get so uncomfortable sometimes in that corporate job. You get so uncomfortable in atmosphere that you have to shift because you're breaking out on every side. Where you are now, it's restricting, it's preventing you from
yeah.
growing. And that is so amazing. So for the woman out there that's listening, the entrepreneur out there that's listening, if you are struggling with your purpose, start thinking about that area in your life where you just feel like, okay, I'm busting out on every side. This situation doesn't serve me. Now, hear me well. I'm not by any means discounting the silent investors, aka our jobs, because that's what we need to pay the bills. That was part of my private preparation, managing and establishing relationships. So I don't begrudge that at all, but I knew there was a point where God wanted to shift. So you might be out there listening and saying, okay, that's what's going on. That's my feeling. It's that time. It's time for me to shift. But make sure that you go before God and get your instructions on where it is and how He wants you to shift. Because I don't want them to say, Sakisha, Dr. Bell said just shift, so I quit my job. Wait a minute. Now let's make sure we use wisdom as well.
I'm glad you said that because you know what I tell people? I was like, because that job, you got to think about it differently. That job is the
Yes.
investor in the
Yes.
dreams and the life that God is preparing you for. So just the investor. And we all need investors. So let them
Absolutely.
continue to invest while you invest in yourself and you invest in the future and you start preparing yourself. Because I should say this, because see, when I took my certified life coaching exam, I took that in December of 2014 in preparation. Get this, I want everybody to listen. In preparation for my retirement, because I was going to retire early, which would have been 2020.
Wow.
I didn't know that 9 months later, I was going to need it. So I was preparing for the future, and God turned me around, and I didn't even know why. I didn't even know. It just seemed like, okay, well, I do coaching now, and I like what I do. I love mentoring people. So this is a good thing to have, right? I'll just add it to my toolbox. He yanked that right on out and said, look, I got something for you. I already prepared you. So you think about it, when you're out and you're wearing your senses ladies and you're carrying a purse, and all of a sudden you look in that purse and you find a $20 bill. Well, you needed that. Maybe you weren't in dire needs of it, but you say, oh, this is helpful. Because maybe your daughter just came and said they needed some money, and you can pull out that $20. That's usually my experience. But that's what God does. He prepares you well in advance. And when you need it, he's right on time. He's right on time. You know what?
Timing is perfect. We don't understand it sometimes, and we're like, why? Some of the things, why are we going through these things? Why am I learning this thing? Guess what? He's preparing you privately for what you're going to have to do later on, and it may not make sense to us, and I understand that, but he knows, he understands. So I'm just going to say, we've got some listeners that are saying, once you see, you have to have faith to step into purpose. Then it's time for a shift, and you have to shift into divine purpose. And that is true, because sometimes we don't even recognize it. My husband and I both came from families of divorce. Okay, did we ever think he was going to use us to help as far as restoring marriages? No, I was one of the last people that I figured God would use, but he knew exactly what he was doing. He was helping me in the posture of building relationships, even in healthcare, and being able to help solve problems. And I'm like, and it was so interesting because I was learning that from the professional perspective. But then every now and then I'd have people coming to me in the pharmacy to get their medication. They start talking to me more and more about their relationships, what's going on in their marriages and their businesses. And I'm like, wait a minute, But it's funny that God will prepare you for what you need to do. There will be conversations that will be taking place, a week or so ahead of time. So then when these conversations come up, it's like, oh my goodness, that's when a light went off. It's like, oh my God, I thank you for preparing me for that. Because if I had to answer that in my own strength, oh my goodness. But just he prepares you for what he's going to call you to do. So to that listener, to that viewer that's wondering, that's like, oh my gosh, God, I don't feel equipped to do so. I don't feel qualified to do so. He qualifies, or he empowers those that he's equipping. So be mindful. Trust the process. We're not expected to get it perfect. What he's looking for is obedience, a willing and submitted vessel that he can use. So to that listener, to that entrepreneur, it's going to be okay. Take that first step into your purpose. Dr. Bell, let's talk about it a little bit more, because when you're going through these different phases in your life and you're stepping into purpose, there's so much going on in the lives today. There's a pandemic, there are protests, there are racial inequalities. So how can a young lady or an entrepreneur, what aspect can their purpose kind of contribute when you're dealing with these types of situations or challenges that we're facing today?
Oh, yes. And you know what? And I want everybody to listen to this, because you have purpose. And when I teach purpose and I talk about purpose, I'm not talking about the roles. It's not the roles that you play. It's who you are when you show up in that role, because the roles may change, but who you are and the purpose for you doesn't change. And so right now, with all the issues that are going on, I think it's a unique time. And what the pandemic has shown us is God is calling his people, his purpose-driven people, to step in that purpose, because there's a problem out there for you to solve. And you will know that because it's pulling at your heart, it's tugging. It's that sense of, I gotta do something, that's calling you. And that's a window into the purpose Because when it starts aggravating you like that and your soul is unrest, like how many of you watch George Floyd being killed there? How many times did you watch the Black Lives Matter out there, or when you saw injustices happening, or when you see kids at the border? See, I always think there's somebody out there that God has purpose that can come in and make it right, that can come in and make it better, that can be a source for those others. So it's so many things. And we don't have to worry about competing. We don't have to worry about our light being dimmed by somebody else. We just got to share the light that God has for us. And so it's so many things out there. And now, and especially to the young people, life is different. For you and I, Shakisha, we're 50 something years old. I'm 60 now as of last month. And so the way I do things is a little differently because I didn't grow up with all of that technology. But our kids today, the young people, they have access and opportunity. And now look at your show. You can reach millions right from the privacy of your own home, from your own office. So we can touch even more lives. That's how great this is. And if we're sitting there still belaboring what happened in the pandemic, we're missing the opportunity. We're missing that opportunity to go and surrender, spread your wings, and fly. And just soar like an eagle, right?
I'm telling you, that is so true. And to that listener out there that's just, grappling with this concept, there is something on the inside of you that God has put there. And it's a solution to a challenge that someone's facing. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a coworker, maybe a family member. You never know. But I would definitely encourage you, seek God and find out what it is. And don't be afraid. So many people feel that I've got to have it all together. It's got to be perfect. There's a reason that there is a blueprint. When you are building a home, they draw it in pencil and you can review. You can go back and make changes. But what God is looking for is just someone that's willing to step out. He's not looking for perfection. So if that's the one thing that's been holding you back, can I encourage you today to release that? We don't need to be perfect. People are looking for you to show up authentically as who you are. Dr. Bell is telling us, look, I've got 30 plus years of corporate experience. Things were not perfect. Things don't always go according to plan, but that doesn't mean that my walk is any less valuable than yours. I want to step out and be the solution, be the change that I'm called to be. And so for all of my ladies out there, for all of my entrepreneurs out there, all my game changers, come on, it's time to step up and step out. We did a teaching maybe a couple weeks ago on the Women's Network, and it was talking about it's your time. So for that entrepreneur, it's time to write that book. You don't have to do it all in one day. Write 2 pages a day. You know what? In 30 days, you could have gotten half of a book done. Start that website. Start that business. Start getting involved. Timing is never going to be perfect. Just start somewhere, because a year from now, you will wish you have started. For a lot of the people that have been coming through this show, we're looking at them. What they're doing now is a result of the seeds that they have sown. Some of them years ago, some of them during the pandemic. We're at home. I can reach an audience. I'm going to start doing lives. I'll start doing interviews, start a radio show, start a podcast, start something. Just allow God to use you. And I'm telling you, the peace that you're going to have on the inside of you, it's going to help settle some of that unrest. Just go ahead and start. You start getting that release like, thank you, God, I started. I never thought years ago I'd have to walk away from pharmacy. It wouldn't have, because of medical reasons. That was my plan A, to be a pharmacist until I was 65, unless I got to the vice president, but that's something totally different, to a vice president position in the company. But God had a different plan for me. So that doesn't mean that I'm any less of a person. God said that was an amazing position and it served you for a season. Now, just the reason why you got uncomfortable those last couple of years, because it was time to shift. And how many of you knew it was kicking and screaming to walk away from a 6-figure income? kicking and screaming. God had to literally make it such that I couldn't go back to the job because he knew that was my comfort zone. So for some of you, this is time to step out of that comfort zone. Now be led. I'm not saying just go jump, but what I am saying is just follow the leading. Start something. Recognize it's time to shift. And for those of you, just start something. You can start small and watch God multiply it. So, Dr. Bell, you have so much going on, so many opportunities to help impact and empower these a million women. How can they stay in contact with you?
Oh, thank you so much. And I wanted to just share just one brief point on the issue of perfection because you talked about
Mm-hmm.
that. And in the work that I do, I'm working with women to help them to really find their purpose, discover purpose, and step out and become the game changer that they were meant to be. A lot of times, that what has stopped them before, or what stops them in the path, in the midst, is the desire or the need to be perfect. Well, perfection comes from an insecurity that sometimes we don't face because we're fearful of what somebody might say or what somebody might do or whatever. And it's like, well, if it's not perfect, they're not going to accept me. Well, see, that's not your target audience because the person that's looking for you is the one in which you have a solution. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as you got the right solution, it won't matter that everything else is perfect, but you got to get started. So I appreciate you really honing in on that because it's that issue of perfection that comes from inside of us that we got to get rid of. So, but anybody out there who's looking to find their purpose or needs that breakthrough or maybe you're thinking about the business and don't know where to start. So that's part of what my coaching programs do. But you can follow me on all the social media outlets. But my website is www.drjenalbell.com. And that's Jena, Jena. And on there, you'll get access to resources. I have free resources out there. And then you can find out more about the programs that I offer. You can join my Purpose Driven Woman Network. You can shift to it just right there on the website. So just feel free to go out there, connect with me, send me a message. You can set up a consult, and we can see whether or not I can help you. It's not for everybody, but it's for that woman who's out there who's ready to change her life, who wants to be that game changer. And you can connect with me right there and schedule an appointment.
Dr. Bell, it's been such an amazing time having you on here. Can you take about 30 seconds and just tell that one closing word of advice you would have for that they're struggling with their purpose or whatever you feel led to, but can you give them that one closing piece of advice?
Absolutely. And that is, do not go around thinking that you need to be validated by anybody. God's already done that. You are already affirmed. So don't let anything stop you. Get out of your head and just get moving because it's the head that stops us. But go from your heart, and God will carry you every step of the way.
That is awesome. So to all of our listeners, I just want to thank you. And just a quick reminder, make sure you stay connected with me on all forms of social media. But to be honest, Instagram, that's my spot. You follow me, I'll follow you back. So we could definitely stay connected and get to know more about one another. But I'm on every form of social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, under Marriage Can Win. And just a quick reminder for all of you that are entrepreneurs out there that are listening, make sure you stay connected with me so you can get the information on our upcoming Couplepreneur Business Summit that's taking place this summer. I'd love to get the details in your hands. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Bell, for joining us. Thank you so much to all of our viewers and to all of our listeners. Make sure that you share this broadcast out. Make sure that you have fellow entrepreneurs that are maybe struggling in their purpose. This is the solution that they need. So make sure you share it out. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And